For this project, we're going to be creating a URL shortener. So as soon as we run this script, we're going to have the option to enter a URL. And in this case, I'm going to enter this large URL, which I took from Google. It's just a Google search, but as soon as we tap on enter, it's going to spit out a shortened link. And if we tap on this shortened link, it will take us exactly to the page which I had originally copied the URL from. So it's a simple project, but it's quite effective, and we are going to do this in Python. But let's delete everything as always so we can start from scratch. Now, the very first thing we have to do is go to this URL because we're going to be using an API that does the shortening for us. And I'm going to be leaving this link in the resource section of this course, so you can just tap on that. And then you're going to have to sign up for an account. It's free to sign up, so you can just do that. And once you get to this page here, which is the first page you should see when you log in, you're going to want to go to the API section down here, because inside here, they're going to have a section called API key. And we need this API key to actually make some requests. And originally, you're not going to have any API key here, so you're going to have to tap on Manage API Key and generate/change the API key and tap on OK. Then it's going to load and create a new API key for you so that you can insert it in your project. Then just copy that API key and go back to the project because we're going to be using it later. But first of all, we need to import from typing the final type, and I'm going to use that to define constants. Then you're going to want to import requests. And as always, if you don't have this installed, just go to the terminal and type in pip install requests so that you can add it to your project and so that you can use it. But first of all, we're going to type in API key of type final, which will be of type string, is going to equal our API key. So this is the API key we'll be using to make requests. Next, we're going to have a base URL, and that's going to equal final of type string as well, and we just need to paste in the URL that is used to make the API request. In this case, it's https://cut.ly/api/api.php. And you can find that under the API documentation. So if we actually go back to API, tap on API documentation, click on the regular API, you should see that we have this link over here, which we will be using to make the request. But let's create a function called shorten link. And here we're going to place in a full link of type string. And the first thing we need to create is a payload. And the payload is essentially the settings we use when we make a request. So for example, we want to add the parameters of key, which is the API key, and of the short, which is the full link. So short is the link we want to shorten. And that's all information you'd find on the API documentation. I'm not making it up. It's something that they actually have. And you can see it immediately in the API documentation that we have the key here and the short. And there are some other parameters that we can use, but we're not going to be using those for this project. But with that, we can add a request, which will equal requests.get, and we will use the base URL with the parameters, which is the payload. Then we're going to get some data back of type dictionary, which will equal request.json. Now, if there is some URL data, which we're going to create right here, and that's going to be equal to data.get URL. So that should be one of the keys in the dictionary that we get back from data. So if that actually exists, we're going to also make another check and say if URL data at the index of status is equal to 7, then we're going to shorten the link. And the reason I decided to use 7 is because in the documentation, you also have this section here for URL statuses, and 7 is the only one that returns to us that it is okay, that we actually did something that worked. All the other statuses need to be handled separately, but if it is 7, it means we did something good and that we can continue. So if URL data is equal to 7 or the status, then we can actually shorten that link. So short link of type string is going to equal URL data of short link. Or we're not actually shortening anything here. We did the shortening up above when we made the request, but this checks that we actually got a valid response back. And we're going to print the link to the user. So link is going to equal, or it's going to be this over here, the short link, so the user can see it. Else we're going to print that there was an error status. And that's just going to be the URL data at the status. So that's the simple way to create this. Now we're going to type in def main, and in here we're going to get the link of type string, and I'll call this input link, and that's going to equal input enter a link. And then we want to shorten that link, so we'll enter that input link. Then we'll check if name is equal to main, and we'll run main. Now we can run this and test it out. And to test this out, I'm going to be using the Python website. So I'm going to enter python.org/documentation. And as you could see, it spit out a good link for us. And if we tap on that link right there, it's going to take us back to the Python documentation. So creating a URL shortener was as simple as that. But as a homework problem for yourself, there are a lot of errors that can occur. And this doesn't handle any of them. This just handles what happens if it is successful. But sometimes this is going to throw some errors. So you might want to include some try and except blocks. And also, if you go back to the API documentation, you'll see that there's a lot of other statuses. Try to make it so that you handle all of these, because I guarantee you will run into these. And the last thing to note is that at the bottom of the documentation, it tells you your limits for your account. With a free account, you can only create 30 per month, so it's quite limited, but that's just one more thing to keep in mind with your URL shortener.